This is the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metrics Card. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metrics Card. I'm your host, Shreshta, and today we have Eric Staples joining us. He is the Director of Growth Strategy at Bluedog Design, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with him because we're going to talk about two things mainly. One is how to nail in our strategy when it comes to brands, and two, it's all about leadership styles and things, something that we've never discussed on this podcast. And I'm sure it's just not going to be useful for our audience, which is brand manufacturers, but also to a wider audience. And I'm excited for this. And I'm sure I have things to learn from him. So let's get started. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metrics Card. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Shrestha. Thanks very much. Good to be with you today.
Yeah. So I would love to dig in a little bit about your background. You started out as a chemist and then you moved to the brand side, and that's very interesting. You are a science person and now you're on the creative art side. How did that happen? And what are the kind of things that you brought from there to here?
Yeah. How it happened is a long story that I won't bore you with here, but it was essentially a friend of a friend. I realized at a certain point after getting my degree in chemistry, unfortunately, that I didn't want to spend all my days in a basement with no windows with people that very rarely talked because they were so focused on their research. That just really wasn't me. I didn't have a plan C at that point. I was already kind of had moved from pre-med to chemistry, and I thought that was it. And so I just kind of wandered around a bit, and over the course of time, got introduced to a friend of a friend who owned a marketing company. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any use for chemists, so they set me to work unpacking boxes and entering metadata.
Yeah.
And then Shrestha, their executive assistant, quit on a Friday, and they needed a warm body in that seat on Monday. And I was the closest warm body. That was the extent of my qualifications, I think, at that time. But once I got into that seat and started, it was we were largely package design at the time. It's a company that I'm still with 19 years later, Bluedog. But it just made sense to me. The world of design, the world of semiotics and symbolism and appeal and conversion, it all made sense to me.
Wow, that's inspiring. So you work with a lot of brands of different sizes at Bluedog. What's the first step you sort of take when developing a growth strategy that resonates with a wider market or diverse cultures?
Yeah, I think the thing that is most important to us is getting into some real diagnostics. A lot of times, teams, organizations will be very focused on the goal they're trying to achieve. And that's good and that's right. We want to be very clear on that. We want to be very clear on why we want to achieve that goal and what we're expecting from it. But we also want to get really tight on what problems are we trying to solve. And that goal, that objective, what does that really solve for our business? And so we pull out the conversation around barriers and issues and tensions immediately to make sure that the thing that we're going after really does solve a meaningful problem for our business. We found that solving problems for growth is the most effective way to actually grow. Pulling down the barriers that get in the way of growth is actually a more effective way to grow than even just shooting for that lofty ambition.
Makes so much of sense. And I was researching about you and I read about this break it down to build it up approach that you have. And that's pretty cool. Even I resonate a lot with that. I sort of follow this macro to micro view approach where you sort of dig in later after having an overall perspective of things. So how does this method sort of work in practice, especially when dealing with complex challenges in brand strategy? Like, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, that's actually, to your exact point, the more complex it is, the more you need to break it down and really look at the components, the parts and pieces. To your point, that is what my current career has in common with chemistry. It was, back then it was breaking down molecules and saying, what is this made of and how do we build it back together in a way that makes more sense and does whatever we want it to do, whatever that molecule's meant to do for us. Same thing with marketing challenges. Like, what do we have here? What are we dealing with? What are the issues? What are the objectives? And and then what are the most important things to solve for first?
Yeah.
What's the order of operations, so to speak? And something that I probably should have even said in the first answer, maybe most importantly of all, is how are you going to measure success?
Yeah. Yeah.
How will you know that you're doing the thing that you're wanting to do? And there's, some projects have very clear success metrics because they're built into the methodology. But what we find a lot of times is, especially the more ambitious the growth goal, the more ambiguous the measurement of that growth. And it's not just even how will we know we've succeeded. Maybe even more important than that is, what are the progress signals that will tell us we're on the right path? So you're hearing in all of that a breakdown into the sort of irreducibly complex component pieces and solving for each one in a cadence that makes the most sense.
So true. Uh, how do you think it has evolved over the years? You've been part of Blue Dog for about 2 decades, and it's so different right now. The way marketing is done, it's fast paced. There's AI. There's so much noise.
Yeah. It has been a wild ride, and it seems to get wilder every year. Lately, every week almost.
Oh yeah.
Why I'm still with Blue Dog 19 years after starting is because we keep sort of staying on the edge of organizational problem solving. I mentioned when I first joined, we were largely package design, and so that was great, a great place to learn the realities of brand, because if it doesn't work at shelf and if it doesn't work on the package, it doesn't work, period. And that is the most, I mean, as much as I also love a good, sexy 30-second spot, the shelf reality, whether that is, retailer shelf or digital shelf, so to speak, is where the rubber really meets the road. And so that was where I learned, and I think as an organization, we really learned the mechanics of brand growth
Yeah.
on the ground. And then we essentially were always just asking ourselves, what is the next thing that our clients are going to have to solve to do what they want to do, to meet their objectives, to grow in the ways they want to grow. And that got us into more strategy, more strategic conversations. And then that became a huge practice area. That got us more into, okay, we've got the now sorted. How do we sort the next? And then we started doing much more innovation. And the sort of through line or red thread that I think made that meaningful, and not just, hey, here's another agency that does innovation consulting, was that we were never trying to create off-the-shelf solutions that we could then apply and scale to everyone. We weren't trying to be the out-of-the-box, here's your innovation solution consultancy. We were trying to be growth problem solvers. And so the good side of that is we are kind of continually on the forefront of growth challenges. I think the challenging side of it, but it's why we're all here anyway at Blue Dog, is our job is different every single day. Even if we're doing something that we've done before, we're always looking to sort of apply that, or maybe even co-create it in a new way, in a fresh way that makes sense for the particular context.
Yeah, I really like how you mentioned that it's just not about solving about the now, but also the next, and that's really what matters in 2025 or moving forward, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing I researched about you is that at some point you helped a subsidiary of a German candy company understand the importance of speaking the right language to their audience. So,
Yeah.
that happened? How did you kind of diagnose these kind of misalignments that brands need to work with?
Yeah, diagnose is actually the perfect word for that. And it speaks to a sort of workshop training teaching that we do very much as a side gig. It's not our core, growth consulting revenue streams of either strategy or design or innovation. But one of the practices at Blue Dog that I lead is organizational upskilling. And we take the things that we've had to learn to be effective, the practices and disciplines that we built for ourselves, and we essentially externalize that and give them as practices to clients. And that's a perfect example of one of those practices. We have a training workshop called Storycraft, the art and science of audience impact. And this team had come in to take that training because they wanted to be more effective. They were struggling to be effective even just collaborators, let alone sort of influencers with their German leadership and counterparts. And we have a model that is very sort of descriptively called our head, heart, gut model. And the maybe provocative assertion that it's rooted in is that there are really only three kinds of people in the world. When you get down to it, as it relates to decision making and processing information and navigating complex situations, everyone has one of three defaults: head, heart, or gut. And as an aside, that's probably not new language to you, because it's out there. It's out there both in the leadership development literature and in the scientific literature. There's actual like neurology that aligns to that. But the challenge with particularly leadership development notions around head, heart, gut is they all say the same thing. HBR article, Forbes, books, they all say to be an effective human being, but especially a leader, you have to know when to lean into your head, and when to lean into your heart, and when to lean into your gut. You need to be a well-rounded decision maker. And that is true, Shrestha, but our provocation is it's not very helpful because we don't have equal tendencies. We don't have the innate ability to just have all three in equal measure and leverage them, on a whim. And so our approach is to help people and help teams understand what the individual's defaults are, because you need to know your own mental maps and know the mental maps of your audience. And this is kind of the shortest way to that emotional intelligence, of the shortcut to understanding the core compass a person might have. That's the background. And you can imagine, I suspect, what a head person is kind of lensing their decision making through: logic, reason. A heart person is lensing through convictions, belief, connection. A gut person or gut team or gut organization, because it does scale up, are lensing through instinct, progress, movement, and intuition. So that's the tee up to the story. And I'll tell a very short version of the story because I've been talking for a few minutes now. But this team came in, they said, we're not making any headway. Help us be more effective. Help us impact our audience more. And we got to the middle module that was head, heart, gut. And we had assessed, we'd done an assessment for it. We had assessed the whole team. And something like, I don't know, 65% of the team were hearts.
Oh.
That was their center. And it was an unusual sort of majority of the team had that inclination. And so, and as the full U.S. subsidiary, essentially that whole U.S. Portion of the company was a head culture. And I said in the room, what do we think Germany is as a default, as a culture, just in the broadest strokes? And I tell the story when I do the training, and everyone in the room always says head, and they are right. Germany does lean towards head as a culture. And even a German that was in the room at the time nodded along and said, yeah, head. And so that was the big unlock. It was the way that you are viewing the world as a team, the way you're viewing your business, and the way you're certainly telling your stories. You're doing through a heart lens, but you're speaking to a largely head audience, or at least an audience that is more prone to value signal head kinds of things. And so you're literally just not talking the same language, not literally, but figuratively, in terms of what you value, what you prioritize, what you elevate, and how you drive a narrative forward.
Wow, that's very interesting. So is this a sort of framework? Like, how do you really work with brands with a head, heart, gut framework? I'm supposing, like, I'm new to this concept that I would like to understand more. How does this work?
Yeah, so it applies in a couple ways. And in fact, I just did a training with a team yesterday, just around this. We spent 2 hours going deep into head, heart, gut. We assessed the whole team, and it's of course not a business only construct. It's a human construct. We think this is true, and we've been using it for a little over 8 years, I think. Hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people across regions, across even countries and cultures, and it applies every time. So we're feeling pretty good about the replicability and accuracy of it. The most practical application, like I said, moves in two directions. One is when you're presenting or even just in a meeting with someone, when there's an interpersonal interaction, and that interaction is always going to be some sort of exchange. I think that's actually, as a side note, something that people miss or just don't focus on enough. They think a presentation, a pitch, a meeting, even a workshop is largely about storytelling. And I love storytelling just as much as anyone else. But I would say, and Bluedog kind of holds true, that it's more an exchange than it is a story. Everything's an exchange. And so you need to approach it a little bit more like negotiation than you do classical storytelling. And so that's kind of what our principles are rooted in. That means you need to know what your audience needs from you if you're going to get what you need from them. And you need to particularly know who your main decision makers and stakeholders are, and how they view the world and what they're going to be needing from you. Head, heart, gut is just the fastest, shortest way to do that. If I'm a head personally, if I'm talking to a gut decision maker and I'm trying to facilitate a decision, and I speak to that gut like a head, I'm losing them in the first 5 minutes, maybe not even that long, because I'm going to do the build up. I'm going to talk about the data. I'm going to talk about the methodology, because that's important to me. And the gut decision maker is sitting there waiting to hear the point and the punchline. And so I need to think through their lens and story through their lens. If I can say one more thing, the other side of it is not just I'm trying to get something done on presenting. It's also just collaboration. It's a great team building tool. On the one hand, because those three centers, which of those do you not need in a decision? You need all three of them. And so it's important to have that represented on your team. But also how those centers interact is really specific and interesting. From my own experience, I can tell you, a head and a head working together will be great if they agree. If they don't, they'll literally butt heads. A gut's favorite person to have on their team, because they really, their underlying need is to have their path supported. Their favorite person on the team is going to be a heart, because the heart is so good at seeing possibilities and bringing energy. A gut will tend to be impatient with a head, because the head wants to ask a lot of questions, and the gut is like, let's keep moving. I'm being really reductive, Shrestha. I'm being kind of, almost archetypal here, but those are the kinds of applications that, although it is a little bit broad stroking, it still does actually show up and apply in those ways. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Very interesting, Eric. Like, I totally loved this part of this podcast. And I'm thinking this is also a lot to do with empathy.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's actually, if and you can cut out whatever you want to cut out here, but if I can just tell another quick story that applies exactly to that. Empathy, insofar as empathy is a skill set that just how's you putting yourself in the other person's shoes, in their perspective, right? What better way to start putting yourself in their shoes and start seeing things from their perspective than understanding their mental map and understanding how it's different from yours. All of us have a sort of tendency to think we see reality as it actually is, and none of us actually do. We all see reality through our own lenses, and this is a great way to try on someone else's lenses really quickly. And how that worked for me when I first learned it, I was ahead. I've been ahead for as long as I've, can remember. I do think it is basically hardwired into us, but I was a very immature head, Shrestha. I used to say, early in my career, I used to say, I don't have opinions. I don't have time for opinions. There's data and there's implications. No one needs opinions. You can hear the immaturity in that. But that was my sort of worldview. That's how I saw reality. And when I was introduced to this, I realized that was not necessarily all of reality. And I said, okay, I want to be as well-rounded as possible. Let me know my strengths as a head. Let me know my weaknesses and limitations as a head, and be the best head I can be. But then I want to actually move into what HBR or Forbes or any, big business publication would say, and I want to be well-rounded. So how do I do that? And for me, it was watching people who are really empathetic leaders, who are heart leaders,
Right.
and saying, "Oh, I'm going to write that down. That's good language. Oh, I'm going to say that to people." It was literally, what language can I use
Yeah.
to fake it until I make it, to speak it while I learn it. That was an easy place for me to stretch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I couldn't stretch, I needed a supplement, was the gut space. Like I said, I really didn't like intuition. I had no grid for that.
Yeah.
And so I would phone a friend, as the colloquialism says. I would say, "All right, Stanton, who's our now CEO,
Yeah.
I need a gut check. I don't have intuition. Tell me." I would actually, Shannon would come to meetings with me with gut teams and gut clients, and she would signal like, "Okay, stop asking questions," and help me translate that. And that became kind of the model that we teach. And when we have new Blue Doggers, this is one of the first things we teach them. Know what you are,
Yeah.
stretch where you can,
Yeah.
and supplement where you can't. Over time,
Yeah.
you'll internalize it all, but don't try to start with internalizing it all.
Makes so much sense. I can't
Yeah.
agree more on this. Uh, that brings me to another fact that right now in the e-commerce domain, I'm talking from a tech stack perspective. What we
Mhm.
also see is that there are a lot of head people with the data and analytics mindset, but with AI, it's also a push for a lot of insightful things to come out, like
Right.
and studying consumer psychology a layer deeper. So
Yeah.
we are in a transformative state right now, and people really need to, I think, evolve from a head person to a heart person. Like just
Yeah.
evolve from one to another, just not be stuck to one.
I couldn't agree more, Tristan. I think you're spot on, and I think that's why we've been doing this training more and more, and more teams are asking for it. I think in part because of that. It's like, okay, AI is changing the dynamic of what we do day to day, sort of skill wise,
Yeah.
hard skill wise. But that actually makes the soft skill stuff even more important. The human stuff becomes more important, and the more that we um, are going to need to humanly interact as AI takes care of the automative parts of our jobs, the more we're going to need to be good interactors.
Right.
And I think this, I know it's our tool, so I'm biased, but I think this is one of the best tools. It's one of the best shortcuts to having that efficacy. You point out a pattern that I can absolutely confirm.
Yeah.
When we do training like this for teams that are like data and analytics teams, head is the predominant center. When we do training for sales teams, gut tends to be the predominant center, and that makes sense too. Like, they have to kind of read people and go on their instinct.
Yeah.
When we do training for insights, you mentioned that too.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's actually the pattern is kind of a 50, I don't want to say fully 50%, but kind of like half and half, head and heart. And that makes sense too, because you're either in insights because that is the place where the best data is,
Yeah. Yeah.
or you're in insights because that's the most human side of business.
Yeah.
And the most connection side of business. And so it is interesting to see those patterns arise. And to the point that you were alluding to, Shrestha, that's what makes it so important. Or teams like that in particular that do have a patterned lean to actually disrupt their defaults and understand that if we're a head function, but we've got, for example, a gut CEO, we need to know how to speak that language if we're going to influence that person.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Big time.
Yeah. And I think maybe you mentioned something, or maybe I did, about the fact that this is business, sure, applications, organizational applications, but like this is human. Invariably, when we do this training, someone will say, and it happened just yesterday, someone will say, "I think this is going to help my marriage," because I'm realizing right now that I'm a gut and my husband is a head, and that's starting to explain some things. And maybe now this will give us a little bit of a translation tool, even in the home. And that's like my favorite kind of bonus, when like you can take the value of something you learn at work, and it makes your life better even outside of work.
For sure. It molds our personality in a different way, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. So I see that you come with a very transformative mindset, working with a transformative mindset for leaders. And what would be your piece of advice for leaders of today?
Great question. Take our training, would be the first advice.
Yeah.
But
Especially those who are working on the brand side.
yeah, I think right now in this sort of global cultural moment, I think I would want to say there is no one best way to make decisions,
Right. Yeah.
but there are a whole lot of ways to wreck decisions.
Yeah.
And if you focus less on trying to find the one right answer or the one right path, and focus more on not going into the ditches on either side
Yeah.
of the pretty wide path, then you'll have better outcomes. You'll have better outcomes. If you can focus on 80% confidence and let go of the last 20% of getting to certainty, then you'll move faster, you'll actually have better outcomes, and ultimately the quality of your decision making will improve. And I'm not the first to say this, and I'm not the expert in this space necessarily, but I'll repeat what I've heard from the experts. Being a quality decision maker is far more important than making the right decisions every time.
Okay.
It's more important for your teams. It's more important for your sense of satisfaction and fulfillment from those decisions. And so in this space where many of us, many leaders, many organizations are intentionally or otherwise trying to outsource the decision-making to data and AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really think that's the one thing that AI is never going to be able to replace in humans is decision-making, which means we are going to need to be even better and ever better at decision-making moving forward.
Definitely. That was a wonderful conversation with you, Eric. Totally enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Our audience
Me too.
are also gonna love it. Do you have any particular show notes from the head hard gut theory that you share?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I'll send you a couple of I can send you a couple of visuals actually that kind of break down the basics if that would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. We will.
Yeah, and that'll kind of give the descriptions of each of those and a little bit of how that applies.
For sure. For sure. We got to add that in the show notes, and amazing conversation, Eric. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you for the time.
We've come to the end of the episode. If you loved what you just listened to, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back next Monday with a really awesome guest. Stay tuned until then.